everywhere all at once. But it was a reason. It was a good reason that I could hold on to. You know, it was kind of like a relief, a weight off my shoulders.
I can imagine. I mean, I've been
listen
there.
to
I know
a
that
nice
feeling.
little
And for you,
podcast
you
for a
know,
bit.
obviously you have a wonderful personality, but for you, it was this relief of, oh no, I don't just have a bad personality, right? Which I actually think that that's probably a pretty common feeling in the ADHD world.
Absolutely. I think when you get diagnosed as a kid, it's a lot different than when you've grown up your whole life not knowing that you had something like that, and then discovering that, oh, there are reasons for why I overcompensate for certain things or why I need to mask other things. So it's definitely a different feeling when you are diagnosed with it in adulthood.
I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I am gonna get in there.
A lot of people don't realize, like, when you have ADHD, again, it's not just about hyperactivity. It can be for some people, but for a lot of people, it can really affect social skills. Other than distraction, like, what other ways does ADHD affect you socially?
It makes me very flustered and gives me a lot of anxiety when I go outside. Before I started taking medication, I had a lot of social anxiety. I couldn't even go to Costco without having a full-on panic attack just because there was so many things going on. You know, the ladies yelling free sample, and of course I want that sample, but I want the other sample across the aisle. There are a lot of ladies giving out samples at Costco, and I love free samples. But I would just dread going to parties, going to really just any social event. Not that I didn't want to. I absolutely wanted to see people and see friends. I like going to parties. But when I get there, I would always just be so overwhelmed, and, you know, the sweat would just start dripping down, and I would just become so agitated that I realized not only was I not having fun, but I don't think anyone who was talking to me was having fun. And that's something that makes me sad, when someone's talking to me and they're not having fun. So I avoided going outside. I avoided seeing people for brunch or outside of work obligations. I just kind of stayed at home.
Did anybody ever tell you that it seemed like they weren't having fun, or do you think that was your own narrative?
I have a very poor narrative internally, but I don't think anyone has outrightly told me other than my parents.
Sticks with you, huh?
It really does, yeah. I think I've used my whole life to run away from a few times where my dad said that I was a very boring person.
Boring?
Yes.
Why boring, do you think?
I was a very depressed kid. I was a very dissociated kid, mainly because of all the traumas that they have put me through. But I daydreamed a lot, and oftentimes when they would talk to me, I would get very distracted. And so he would just say, "You're kind of a boring kid." Which, you know, if you have kids, don't say that to your kids.
Yeah.
It really haunts them, and then they spend their whole lives trying to do comedy, and that does not pay.
Yeah, we've been talking for a few minutes. You are anything but boring, number one.
Well, thank you.
Secondly, I'm so sorry. It's an awful thing to be told, and it's not fair, and you've carried it with you. With a lot of my guests, I talk about relationships with family and stigma around ADHD, or like disbelief even. And with some people, like, they're like, yeah, I'm starting to talk to my parents about it. I'm going to talk about my ADHD and what's going on with me, with my family, and try to squash some myths with them. And like, for others, it's like, you know what, let's move on and let me work on myself. Which camp would you say that you're in?
Oh, the second camp. Absolutely. It's been a struggle explaining, you know, how to send an email attachment to them. I'm not going to sit down and tell them how my brain works. That's way more complicated than an email attachment.
Yes, it is. Way more complicated.
It has been a struggle to mask it in front of my family, or just at least put it aside when I'm with them and then deal with it in my own time.
What does the masking look like at family gatherings?
The masking looks like just smiling all the time, nodding your head when they're talking to you, and also just if they ask you any questions, just stuff food in your mouth and just say, this is really good. Did you make this? Wow, you're such a good cook. And then they'll be so flattered by that they'll totally forget that question that they asked you.
I'm sorry that you have to do that, and yet you tell these stories with so much humor. I can't help but chuckle a little bit. Some of what you were describing about being at parties or being at a bar, is there any sensory stuff going on too?
Absolutely. I smell all the smells, unfortunately. And I don't have bad eyesight, so I can see distracting things from really far away. And I don't have the best hearing, but I can also hear just all of the dogs. I can hear their little feet.
All the doggos.
Sniffles. There's just a lot of different things happening all at once. And
all the
something that I've
doggies.
learned after discovering that I have ADHD is that I need to learn how to really just block out a lot of sensory overload. You know, I need to really pick and choose which ones I zero in on.
I'm not a diagnostician. I don't know why, for you in particular, there's sensory stuff going on. But I know one thing that can lead to that from an ADHD perspective is exactly what you're talking about, which is like, a lot of people think, oh, it's just trouble paying attention. Sometimes it's also trouble figuring out what not to pay attention to.
Absolutely. When people picture someone with ADHD, they always picture someone running around, usually a little boy. And it's not usually grown women who struggle to focus on their daily lives with a lot of sensory overload.
And it's interesting, I mean, I don't remember exactly how many of these interviews I've done at this point, but almost none of the interviews have focused around hyperactivity. And it's not that hyperactivity is uncommon. You know, it's not everyone with ADHD. And like the one or two people who I did talk to about hyperactivity were both women. So there's just so many misconceptions, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah. I think part of the reason could be is that people who have hyperactivity in their ADHD get diagnosed a lot earlier because it's so noticeable. And so they have less of an aha moment because someone else will have aha'd for them.
What humans call magic, we call life.
I want to try something. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I pulled up before our interview a piece of content on our website on understood.org that listed basically like ADHD symptoms that can cause trouble with social skills. And I want to try something. I want to say the symptom. And since you're such a creative person, if you're open to it, I want you to respond by saying like how that translates into
I've always wanted to be on a game show, so yes.
Here we go. Yeah, I've never done this before, Kai. I feel like you're the perfect candidate for this. I'm going to give you the symptom or the ADHD difficulty, related difficulty, and you find a way to spin it. This is actually anti-therapeutic. I shouldn't do this. You find a way to spin it into a negative thing that's related to a bad personality.
Oh no, okay, a negative thing.
Spin it into a negative thing, and then we're going to bring it back around. This is...
Okay. Digging real deep here.
Dig deep. Okay, so someone with ADHD might be distractible. That may manifest as...
That might manifest as when someone's telling you about a really tragic thing that happened, like something, like someone dying, and you realize that you're really thirsty, and so you get up mid-conversation, and then you get a drink of water and come back and going, oh, you're crying, but I was thirsty.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because that was a very sad example, but it's so good. You're good at this. Okay, so distractible, you gave a great example of what that could look like. Another example I had listed could be like just going off topic, right? And people are like,
yeah, that would have been a much easier one. Less sad, so much less death.
There are no wrong answers here.
Is the right answer except for the one that you just did, yes.
You want to do another one?
Yeah, I'm here for all the games.
Okay, trouble with planning.
Oh man. So like when your significant other plans a full day when you're on vacation and they give you this itinerary and they're like, well, first we're gonna go see this bridge and then we're gonna go to a museum and then we have reservations here, and then you blow it up immediately because you saw that there was some kind of exhibit somewhere else and you really needed to see that gummy bear. Imagine if your significant other plans out a full day and you see that there is a traveling world's largest gummy bear exhibit, you want to go to that exhibit and you want to touch all the gummy bears.
This happened, didn't it, Kai?
It didn't, but I'm imagining it in my head.
I love it. Yep, exactly. Trouble with planning could be mistaken for being unreliable or being flaky. All right, let's do one more. Impulsivity.
Okay, so when you get a gift card and you need to use this gift card for something that your house needs, kind of like toilet paper, but then you realize that this gift card, even though it has exactly the right amount of money for toilet paper that you're going to need to use throughout the week, you see something really shiny in the store, and instead you pick up that really shiny thing, and then you don't have toilet paper for the week. And that won't have happened in my life.
Right, impulsivity can show up in other ways too, but like that is a great example. So the purpose of this exercise, I think, that my producer Jessamine is probably like, what is Laura doing? What I'm trying to say is that like ADHD behaviors translate into these like super ubiquitous, quote unquote, bad behaviors. People brush them off and they're just like, oh, bad person, bad personality, whatever, bad at life. I don't know. But really it is something that is related to these symptoms that they can manage but don't have full control over.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, everyone should do what I do, just surround yourself with people, others who have ADHD, and then you're all distracted together.
Do you do that? Do a lot of your friends have ADHD or loved ones?
It's funny. I discovered that I have ADHD, and then because I'm so vocal about my problems and I'm just an overall oversharer, which is good and very, very.
If it don't get out of control,
They have actually picked up on a lot of the symptoms that I complain about, and then they realize that they might also have ADHD. And so I've actually helped a lot of my friends go to their therapist or their primary physician and get tested themselves and get help.
I mean, seriously.
So you're welcome to my friends. You know who you are.
What are the next steps for you then? You're on this path to not just acceptance, but like, not to sound cheesy, but self-love, embracing the ADHD-ness of it all and kind of flipping the script on the bad personality and I'm creative.
Yeah, something that I've really enjoyed about having ADHD is that it has forced me to become more creative. It has forced me to learn a lot of different skills. And that's just because if I get really bored, I'll just try a new skill that I see on Pinterest. If someone made something out of wood, I could just be like, I could do that. And then I'll go out and I'll buy a bunch of materials to do things with wood. But then I'll get really mediocre at this one skill. And then I'll get bored again. And then I'll move on to a new skill that I saw somewhere on the internet, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when the juices really get flowing. 3 a.m. is when I decide I'm going to learn a new skill and I'm going to do it mediocre.
No, and you will crush that skill. I bet you're crushing it.
I will absolutely crush that skill and then move on to the next skill and then maybe crush that skill.
You're mediocre, I'm sure, is crushing all the skills.
Thank you for believing in me.
Kai, I believe in you so much. It's nice to hear you in your own, like, very funny way say what sounds like something really nice about yourself. Like you're acquiring so much knowledge and like you're able to do so many cool, fun things. Kai, this has been so much fun to talk to you. Seriously. I mean, thank you for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I was genuinely extremely excited to talk to you. Well, I love talking about my problems, so having an avenue where everyone can listen to my problems, that's the dream.
Laugh as I throw it away.
Shut down.
You've been listening to ADHD Aha from the Understood Podcast Network. If you want to share your own aha moment, email us at adhdaha@understood.org. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to learn more about the topics we covered today, check out the show notes for this episode. We include more resources, as well as links to anything we mentioned in the episode. Understood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people who learn and think differently discover their potential and thrive. Learn more at understood.org/mission. ADHD AHA is produced by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
Brianna Barry is our production director. Andrew Lee is our editorial lead. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. For the Understood Podcast Network, Scott Koshira is our creative director, Seth Melnick is our executive producer, and I'm your host, Laura Key. Thanks so much for listening.
They're scared of
Laura.
darkness. They're scared of
Fog.
magic. They are scared of where I'm from. Magic is supposed to be safe.
Hi, everyone. It's your host, Laura Key. And surprise, it's a bonus episode. If you follow our show, and I hope you do, you know that we post new episodes every 2 weeks. We're here on an off week, though, to bring you something special. Our friends at the In It podcast, which is part of the Understood Podcast Network, recently put out an episode on ADHD and sleep problems. When I heard it, I thought, I love this and need to share it with ADHD AHA listeners. It helped me understand the connection between ADHD and sleep and the why behind some of my own going to bed behaviors, including why I cannot fall asleep unless I turn on an episode of a TV show I've seen or listened to a million times. The beginning of this episode includes an interview with a mom whose child has ADHD, autism, and sleep challenges. Then later, the hosts talk with clinical psychologist Dr. Roberto Olivardia about the connection between ADHD and trouble sleeping. I hope you enjoy. And if you're a parent of a child with learning differences or ADHD, you really should check out the In It podcast. Not just because the hosts are my buddies, but because it's such a relatable, helpful, and empowering show. You'll find a link in the show notes where you can check out all of their episodes.
Hi, I'm Amanda Morin. I'm the Director of Thought Leadership for Understood.org, and I'm a parent to kids who learn differently.
I'm Gretchen Fisher, a former classroom teacher and an editor here at Understood, and this is In It.
In It is a podcast from the Understood Podcast Network. On this show, we talk to parents, teachers, experts, and sometimes even kids. We're here to offer perspectives, stories, and advice for and from people who have challenges with reading, math, focus, and other types of learning differences.
Today, we're looking at the very real connection between ADHD and sleep problems, and we'll be providing some excellent advice on how to help kids who just can't seem to get a good night's sleep.
Later, we'll hear from Dr. Roberto Olivardia, a clinical psychologist who teaches at Harvard Medical School and has a psychotherapy practice in Lexington, Massachusetts. He specializes in working with kids who have learning differences and with their families. He's also an Understood expert.
First, though, we're talking to Belinda, a mom in Florida who has definitely been in it when it comes to ADHD and sleep challenges.
Belinda has a 12-year-old son who she's calling Mr. B to protect his privacy, which is kind of funny because when I refer to my 12-year-old when I'm talking publicly about him and what makes him neurodiverse, I call him Mr. 12, and we had a really good laugh about that.
Mr. B has ADHD and is autistic, and he's gone through periods where sleep has been a major challenge. And Belinda has the same diagnoses and has had the same struggles.
And we are so grateful to her for sharing her experiences with us. We're talking today about how ADHD can affect sleep, something I know has been an issue for your family. But before we get into it, I'd really love to know a little bit about you and your son. What is he into and what does he like to do?
Well, so Mr. B, he's my only son. So that kind of lets you know right away he does tend to get a lot of extra presents on Christmas. But he's a bright kid. Let's see, he plays soccer. He loves Roblox, which he's playing actually right now. He likes Legos. He loves to read. He's got a good sense of humor for a young child. He's a little bit precocious. And he was diagnosed with ADHD fairly recently in 2018. He also was diagnosed with anxiety at the time, and then 2020 we went back because even though he was on medication, we just were like, something's still a little off. He was diagnosed with autism. Personally, I was also recently diagnosed on the spectrum as well, and I have ADHD and anxiety. So what drove me to get a diagnosis was I felt that a lot of his experiences, a lot of the ways that he was reacting, it was almost like I was looking in a mirror. And it brought back a lot of my past, a lot of my childhood. He's kind of like a mini me. It's interesting.
He sounds like a lot of fun, and I will tell you that Mr. 12 also has ADHD and he uses the phrase autistic. So Mr. 12 is ADHD and is autistic, and is probably playing something like Roblox in the other room right now too.
Do you want to move on to sleep, Amanda?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we should. I would love to move on to sleep. I would love to move on to sleep, but we know that having ADHD can make going to sleep difficult. And I'd really like to know what that looked like for your son, but I'm really wondering if it's something you also have struggled with.
So as a baby, he was, in Spanish we say ojo duro, which means a hard eye. Difficult to fall asleep. And 4 a.m. was his witching hour, so we put him in bed, and like clockwork, at 4 a.m. my husband would go and tend to the baby, and he said his eyes would be like this in the darkness, like kind of looking around. And this is an infant. I mean, he was under 6 months old. Naps were, I mean, it was very difficult to get him to nap. I would literally drive around while he fell asleep. And what also made it a bit difficult as well is hearing from mom friends, oh, mine sleeps through the night, what an angel. And you're like, oh, jeez. So yeah, sleep is, and I was the same way. Sleep is still a struggle to this day for me. My husband's the opposite. He can lie down, go to sleep, no problem.
That's
Lucky.
our house too. There's something about that makes you want to be like, I'm so happy for you, and also wake up because we're awake right now too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I wondered if you just could tell us a little bit about when your son was a baby. I know you said you drove him around. Like, what were some of the other things you did that worked? Because I know that can be a struggle for lots of families.
Yes, so something we're typically used with babies, the rocking chairs, the swaddling. You know, we made sure the temperature was just right for sleep, how he slept, what he was wearing. Music was soothing. We tried also white noise. There was a lot of laying him on my chest, a lot of having him feel like snuggled, a lot of rocking, a lot of late nights.
I've been Mr. 12 with so much. I was actually writing a book when he was a baby, and I would swaddle him, and I was typing, and I say today that I'm still brushing crumbs off the top of his head from when I was eating over him.
Yes.
You know, like, what's his sleep like now?
Well, so he started 6th grade, and when COVID hit in our state, we had lockdown, and then we had to do homeschooling. That really affected his anxiety levels. So when he was beforehand sleeping through the night, post-quarantine lockdown to now, he cannot fall asleep alone. It's been a real struggle. He will not fall asleep unless someone's there with him. He will wake up in the middle of the night, come to my bedroom, unable to sleep. And we did go through a sleep psychologist. We tried medication. Now, I will say, when he was a baby, we lived by the beach, and we lived by a forest, kind of cool situation we have. The beach would tire him out. We'd go there, and he'd play in the waves and the sand and make sand castles, and he would fall asleep on the way home. And when you're talking about crumbs, there would be sand all over his pillow. So that's one thing that I could suggest is when they are younger, definitely tucker them out. I think nature really has a great way to tire kids out and get that nice fresh air in their lungs. But then the pandemic really has made a difference. So he has a Spotify playlist, weighted blankets, night. We tried teas. I mean, I think you name it, we've probably tried it.
Does he worry about going to sleep?
Well, honestly, what happens sometimes is he comes alive at night and he'll want to have conversations. And the thing I will say is, these are the conversations that are important. This is when he tells me, you know, if something is bothering him, what's on his heart, you know. He'll just start having these questions, like these deep philosophical conversations at bedtime. And that's okay, but I'm like, it's 11, you gotta go to bed, we gotta be up at 6 for school. So he'll try to perk him by answering quick and saying, hey, you know, let's talk about this in the morning.
My daughter is she unpacks everything right before.
How old is she?
She is 13. So everything gets unpacked right before then. And like you said, it's a struggle, right? Because these are important conversations that you want to have, but not at 10 o'clock at night. But I wonder what's on your Spotify playlist. What kinds of things are on there that are helping?
We've actually looked at ADHD and sleep. So we'll put those keywords in, and these lists come up. There's one that's classical guitar and a classical piano, but I need to make sure they play for at least 8 hours. That's the key. Because if they stop, it could be great music, but if it stops in an hour or 3 hours, he'll be up. So my best tip would be make sure it's long and play it, on loop.
I have a question around that, though, right?
Yes.
Because I know lots of times families worry about putting phones in the bed with their kids. Does your son ever get distracted by anything else, or does he?
Well, it's an old phone.
Okay.
So it has Wi-Fi, but no calling out. So
Me too.
I put in parental controls, and I put the timer, so it's fixed to the only thing he can access overnight would be Spotify and the flashlight. And that might be it.
Oh, that's helpful.
That's such a good tip.
That's a good tip.
Like, that's such a good tip.
Yeah. Now, he does